My name is Joseph, and what I'm about to share changed my life forever. One ordinary day turned into an extraordinary experience when I faced death and crossed over to the other side. In those moments, I saw things that I never imagined, and I met Jesus face to face. He revealed deep truths about life, including a shocking perspective on something I once thought was harmless: masturbation. The journey left me humbled, awakened, and determined to share what I learned. I hope my experience sheds light on what many struggle with but are too afraid to talk about. I never thought much about life beyond the physical world. My days were filled with work, distractions, and the usual routines of modern life. I had my share of struggles, stress, loneliness, and temptations that I often gave into. Masturbation was one of those things I never questioned. It seemed harmless, something everyone did, and I never considered it an issue. I would indulge whenever I felt stressed or empty, convincing myself that it was a way to relax. But deep down, I always felt a subtle emptiness afterward, a feeling I couldn't quite explain. One evening, everything changed. I was sitting alone in my apartment after a long day at work, feeling exhausted. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my chest, and within seconds, I collapsed. My vision blurred, and I felt like I was falling into darkness. My heart raced, and fear gripped me as I realized something was terribly wrong. Before I knew it, everything went silent. I could no longer hear the sound of my own heartbeat or the world around me. I found myself floating above my body, watching the paramedics rush in through my front door. It was surreal seeing myself lifeless, with people desperately trying to revive me. I felt no pain, just a sense of detachment as I hovered above the chaos. A strange feeling of peace started to take over, and I felt drawn to a distant light. It wasn't like any light I had ever seen before. It was warm, inviting, and filled with a love so strong that it pulled me in. The next thing I knew, I was in a place that was beyond beautiful. Everything around me was radiant, filled with a sense of purity and peace I had never known. I felt weightless, free, and overwhelmed by an indescribable sense of love. But I wasn't alone. A presence stood before me, powerful yet gentle. I knew instantly it was Jesus. His eyes looked at me with a love so profound, I felt exposed, yet completely accepted. In that moment, my whole life flashed before me. Every decision, every struggle, and every hidden thought. I saw how my actions, no matter how small, had impacted my soul. And that's when Jesus revealed something to me that shook me to my core. As I floated above my body, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Everything I had ever known was gone in an instant, and I was left in a state of complete surrender. My mind was racing with thoughts. Was I dead? Would I ever return? But despite the fear, a strange calmness surrounded me. The pull of the light was irresistible. I felt as if I was being gently carried towards it without any effort of my own. As I moved closer, I noticed how everything around me became clearer. The air felt different, lighter, purer, and filled with something I can only describe as love. Suddenly, I passed through what seemed like a veil, and I was met with an overwhelming brightness. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but radiated a warmth that embraced me fully. I felt a presence beside me, and although I couldn't see who it was at first, I knew it was divine. Then I saw him. Jesus stood before me, glowing with an indescribable light. His presence was powerful, yet comforting. There were no words spoken at first, but I felt an immediate understanding passed between us. He knew everything about me, my fears, my struggles, and even the thoughts I had never shared with anyone. Time seemed to stand still, and for the first time, I saw my life from an entirely different perspective. Every moment, every choice, every secret thought was laid bare before me. I saw the impact of my actions, not just on myself, but on those around me. It was then that I realized the truth. Jesus wasn't showing me my life to judge or condemn me. He was helping me see where I had gone wrong. I felt a deep sorrow for the things I had done, the times I had hurt others, and the ways I had ignored my spiritual well-being. The most shocking part was when he addressed something I had never expected, my habit of masturbation. In an instant, I understood how it had affected me on a deeper level than I had realized. I had always thought it was harmless, but Jesus showed me how it created barriers between me and God, filling my soul with guilt and distance. He spoke to me, not with words, but through a profound sense of understanding. You sought comfort in the wrong place. True fulfillment can only come from my love. I was overwhelmed, but in that moment, I knew he was offering me a new chance to change. As I moved deeper into the light, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. The heaviness of my earthly worries, doubts, and fears seemed to vanish. The light wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt. It surrounded me like a warm embrace, filling every part of my being with a love so pure that I couldn't even begin to describe it. I realized then that I was in a place beyond time, beyond pain, beyond anything I had ever experienced before. As I stood there in awe, I noticed that the light wasn't just brightness. It carried knowledge, wisdom, and a deep understanding that resonated within me. Thoughts that had once confused me now seemed so clear. I understood things I had struggled with all my life. It was as if the light was communicating directly with my soul, showing me what I needed to see without words being spoken. Then suddenly I became aware of a figure approaching. As the light parted slightly, I saw him, Jesus. His presence was unlike anything I had ever imagined. He radiated kindness, understanding, and an unconditional love that pierced through all my defenses. His eyes looked straight into me, and I knew he saw everything, every flaw, every failure, every hidden struggle, yet I felt no condemnation, only love. In that moment, all my worries and fears about being judged melted away. Jesus wasn't there to punish me. He was there to show me the truth. I felt as though he had been waiting for me all along, ready to reveal the answers I had been searching for my whole life. I stood there, unsure of what to say or do. But before I could even think, I found myself being drawn closer. As I stood before him, I realized that I wasn't just standing in the presence of the divine. I was standing in the presence of absolute truth. And in that truth, there was no room for denial. I could see my life in a way I never had before. The things I had tried to justify, the actions I had ignored, all became clear in the presence of his light. Then Jesus reached out his hand, and I felt a surge of warmth rush through me. In an instant, I understood the depth of his love and grace. I realized that I had spent so much of my life seeking fulfillment in temporary pleasures, filling voids with things that could never satisfy me, and Jesus, with just one look, made me see how empty those pursuits had been. It was in that moment I knew this experience wasn't just for me to witness, it was for me to change. Jesus wasn't showing me these things to make me feel ashamed, but to set me free from the chains I had unknowingly placed on myself. The next thing I knew, I was no longer standing in the light. Instead, I was watching my entire life unfold before me like a movie playing out in vivid detail. Every moment, every decision, every emotion, I saw it all. But it wasn't just a passive viewing. I was reliving those moments with an entirely new perspective. I could feel what others had felt because of my actions, both good and bad. The review didn't skip over anything. It showed my childhood innocence, my teenage mistakes, my adult struggles. The times I had been kind and loving were shown in such a way that I felt the joy I had brought to others, but the painful moments were equally vivid. I saw the times I had ignored people in need, the times I had spoken harsh words, and most of all, the times I had given in to temptation. I watched as Jesus stood beside me, his presence comforting but unwavering. He wasn't there to condemn me, but to guide me through understanding my choices. The most shocking part was when we came to my struggles with self-pleasure. I had always thought of it as something harmless, something everyone did. But in the review, I saw the moments it had affected my spiritual connection. Every time I indulged, I could see a slight dimming in my soul's light. It wasn't about the act itself, but what it represented, an escape, a reliance on something other than God to fill the emptiness within me. Jesus showed me how it created a pattern of seeking temporary comfort instead of turning to him. And in those moments, I felt the deep regret of not realizing it sooner. I also saw how my choices had influenced my thoughts, my relationships, and even my confidence in life. I had always wondered why I sometimes felt distant from God, and now I understood. My focus had been misplaced. Jesus wasn't showing me these things to make me feel unworthy, but to help me see that true fulfillment comes only from his love, not from fleeting pleasures. Despite seeing my shortcomings, I didn't feel hopeless. Instead, I felt a deep sense of love and encouragement to do better. Jesus showed me the potential I had, the person I was meant to be, and how I could overcome these struggles by leaning on him. As the life review continued, I saw opportunities where I could have chosen differently, moments where I could have turned to God but didn't, and with each realization, I felt a new determination rising within me. I wanted to change, to truly align my life with God's purpose. And Jesus assured me that it wasn't too late. That review changed everything for me. It wasn't just a reflection of my past. It was a guide for my future. Standing in front of Jesus was unlike anything I had ever imagined. The moment I saw him, I felt an indescribable peace flood my entire being. His presence was powerful yet gentle, and his eyes radiated love so deep that it brought me to my knees. I had expected judgment, perhaps even condemnation, but instead, I was met with pure compassion. There were no spoken words at first, but I felt every thought and emotion being communicated directly to my soul. Jesus knew everything about me, every joy, every sorrow, and every mistake I had made. He didn't need to ask questions. He already understood me completely. I felt no need to hide or explain myself because he saw through every layer of my existence. As I stood in his presence, I realized something profound. Jesus' love wasn't conditional. It wasn't based on how well I had performed in life or how many times I had failed. It was a love that went beyond human understanding, embracing even the most broken parts of me. Despite my weaknesses and struggles, he still loved me deeply. Then, without judgment, Jesus began to show me the areas of my life where I had drifted away from him. He gently revealed how my choices, especially my struggle with self-pleasure, had created a barrier between us. I had always thought of it as a personal issue, something that didn't affect anyone but me. But in that moment, I saw how it had distanced me from my spiritual purpose and my connection to God. Jesus' love didn't make me feel guilty. Instead, it awakened something inside me, a desire to be better, to live with more purpose, and to align my life with his teachings. He offered me hope, showing me that I wasn't beyond redemption and that every day was an opportunity to choose him over temporary satisfaction. I felt a sense of renewal in his presence, as if years of shame and guilt were lifted in an instant. Jesus wasn't telling me I was unworthy. He was reminding me of my worth in God's eyes, and for the first time I understood the true meaning of grace. As I stood before Jesus, he addressed something I never expected to hear: my habit of masturbation. It wasn't a scolding or a lecture. Instead, it was a revelation. Jesus showed me how this seemingly harmless habit had silently affected my spirit. I had always viewed it as a private matter, something normal and acceptable in today's world, but Jesus' perspective was entirely different. He revealed how my reliance on self-pleasure had created patterns of escapism. I had been using it as a way to cope with stress, loneliness, and anxiety. But in doing so, I had unknowingly been pulling away from my spiritual path. Every time I sought comfort in it, I was seeking fulfillment in something temporary rather than in God's eternal love. Jesus explained that it wasn't just about the physical act, but the mindset behind it. It was about where I was directing my heart and attention. He showed me how it affected my thoughts, my relationships, and even my ability to connect with God on a deeper level. Each time I gave in, I was reinforcing a cycle of seeking gratification outside of God's design. The most shocking realization was that this habit had been keeping me from experiencing true spiritual intimacy. Jesus made me understand that self-pleasure wasn't fulfilling the deeper longing in my soul. It was only numbing it temporarily. He showed me how much more fulfilling it would be to turn to prayer, meditation, and trust in God's love instead of seeking quick fixes. What amazed me the most was Jesus' kindness in addressing this. There was no condemnation, only an invitation to break free and experience a higher level of spiritual fulfillment. He reassured me that overcoming this struggle wasn't about willpower alone, but about surrendering it to him and allowing his strength to work through me. At that moment, I realized that I had been missing out on something greater all along. Jesus wasn't telling me to stop for the sake of rules or guilt. He was showing me a better way to live, a way that honored my body, mind, and soul. One of the most eye-opening things Jesus revealed to me was the true nature of lust. He showed me that lust wasn't just about physical desires, but about the way it shaped my thoughts, actions, and even my energy. I had always thought it was a harmless indulgence, something that didn't hurt anyone else, but Jesus made me realize how it had affected every part of my life. I saw how lust had subtly influenced my relationships, making it harder for me to form genuine connections. Instead of seeing people as whole beings, I had often viewed them through the lens of my desires. This mindset had caused me to miss out on the true depth of love and companionship that God intended for me. Jesus also showed me how lust drained my spiritual energy. Every indulgence left me feeling emptier and disconnected from God's presence. Instead of drawing closer to Him, I had been feeding an appetite that only grew stronger with time. He explained that lust, when left unchecked, creates a cycle that is hard to break. It clouds judgment, weakens self-control, and distances us from our higher purpose. What struck me the most was how Jesus addressed all of this with love. He didn't shame me, He simply helped me understand the spiritual consequences of my choices. He encouraged me to replace lustful thoughts with thoughts of love, compassion, and gratitude. He showed me that true fulfillment comes from aligning with God's design, not from chasing temporary pleasures. Throughout my life, I had heard different interpretations about sexual purity from religious teachings, but nothing compared to what Jesus personally revealed to me. He didn't approach the topic with condemnation, but with clarity and truth. Jesus showed me that while the Bible speaks about purity and self-control, many people misunderstand it. The issue isn't just about avoiding sin, it's about pursuing a deeper relationship with God. He explained that true purity isn't just about external actions, but the state of the heart and mind. He highlighted how I had used my actions as a form of self-gratification instead of seeking Him in moments of weakness. While the Bible offers guidance, Jesus' explanation was personal, showing me how applying these teachings could transform my life from the inside out. He reassured me that God's love isn't conditional, and overcoming struggles isn't about perfection, but persistence. Jesus encouraged me to lean on Him and embrace the grace that God freely offers. That message changed how I saw purity, not as a burden, but as a pathway to freedom. As I stood before Jesus, feeling the weight of my actions, I expected punishment or rejection, but instead, I experienced something beyond comprehension: divine forgiveness. In His presence, I felt a love so deep and unconditional that it brought me to tears. Jesus wasn't looking at me with disappointment. He was looking at me with a love that I had never known before. I could feel the burden of guilt I had carried for so long begin to lift. I had spent years battling with shame, hiding my struggles, and pretending they weren't affecting my spiritual life, but in that moment I realized that God had seen it all. Every thought, every mistake, and every regret. And yet He was still willing to embrace me, not with judgment, but with open arms. Jesus showed me that forgiveness wasn't about earning His love, but about accepting it. He made it clear that I didn't have to live under the weight of my past mistakes. He reminded me that His sacrifice was enough, that my past didn't define my future, and that I had the power to walk in a new direction. I felt an overwhelming sense of release. It was as if years of guilt and self-condemnation vanished in an instant. Jesus spoke to my heart, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this struggle, and that many people carried the same burden in silence. His words filled me with hope, and I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about stepping into a new life with Him by my side. From that moment on, I understood that true forgiveness isn't just about asking for it. It's about believing that it's already being given. And with that realization, I knew I had been set free. As my experience continued, Jesus showed me something that shook me to my core. There were countless souls trapped in guilt, just like I had been. I saw people weighed down by their struggles, hiding their shame, and feeling unworthy of God's love. It was heartbreaking to see how so many, just like me, believed they were beyond redemption. I witnessed souls burdened with regret, afraid to turn to God because they felt too far gone. They carried their guilt like a heavy chain, believing they had to be perfect before approaching God. But Jesus showed me the truth. His love is not limited by our mistakes. I saw how self-pleasure, addiction, and feelings of unworthiness had consumed so many people. They felt trapped in a cycle, believing there was no way out. But what Jesus revealed was that true freedom comes from surrendering to Him, not from striving to be perfect on our own. I felt a deep sadness realizing how many people live their lives feeling disconnected from God, thinking their struggles made them less worthy. But Jesus' love was so much greater than any sin. He showed me that no one is beyond his reach, and that all it takes is a single step of faith to break free. At that moment, I felt a calling to share this message. I realized that if I could be forgiven and experience such profound love, so could anyone else. Jesus wanted me to understand that my story wasn't just for me. It was meant to help others find their way back to him. Before my NDE, I had always thought of purity as something external, following rules, avoiding certain behaviors, and maintaining an image of righteousness. But Jesus showed me a deeper truth. Purity wasn't just about actions. It was about the condition of the heart. I realized that purity starts with intention. It's about seeking God first, surrendering our desires to him and aligning our thoughts with his will. Jesus explained that self-pleasure, when driven by lust, creates a distance from God, not because the act itself is unforgivable, but because it shifts our focus away from him. Through his guidance, I saw that purity was about more than just saying no to sin. It was about saying yes to a deeper connection with God. It meant filling my heart with his presence rather than temporary distractions. Jesus helped me understand that true purity brings freedom, not restriction. He also showed me how purity extends beyond the physical and into our thoughts and emotions. Every time I indulged in lustful thoughts, it clouded my mind, made it harder to hear his voice, and weakened my sense of purpose. But when I turned my heart toward him, I found a peace that no worldly pleasure could offer. I left that moment with a new understanding. Purity is not about perfection, but about constantly seeking God and trusting in his strength to overcome temptation. When I returned to my body, I knew my life could never be the same. Jesus had given me a mission, and I felt a deep responsibility to share what I had learned with others. I realized that so many people were struggling in silence, feeling trapped in guilt and shame, just as I once had. I felt an urgency to speak out, to let others know that they weren't alone and that freedom was possible through Jesus. I understood that sharing my story wasn't just about my own healing. It was about helping others break free from the same chains. At first, I was scared. Would people judge me? Would they believe my story? But Jesus had given me the strength to push past those fears. I knew that his message of love, forgiveness, and purity was too important to keep to myself. I started small, sharing with close friends and family. To my surprise, many of them had been struggling with similar issues. They had been too ashamed to talk about it, thinking they were the only ones. Seeing their relief and hope confirmed that Jesus had called me to this for a reason. As I continue to share my experience, I am reminded daily of the love and grace that Jesus offers to all. My mission is clear: to remind others that no matter their past, they are deeply loved and always have the opportunity to start fresh with God. The moment Jesus showed me all I needed to see, I felt a sudden pull, an invisible force drawing me away from the divine presence I had come to love. I wasn't ready to leave. Being in his light, feeling that love and peace was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I wanted to stay, to soak in the presence of Jesus forever, but deep within, I understood that my time wasn't up yet. I had more to do, and he had given me a mission to fulfill. In an instant, I felt a jolt. My surroundings changed, and I found myself rushing backward at an incredible speed. It was as if I was being pulled through a tunnel, away from the light and back into my physical reality. Suddenly, I was in my body again. I gasped for air, my chest heaving, and pain flooded through me. The paramedics were hovering over me, their faces filled with relief and urgency. I could hear their voices calling my name, but all I could think about was what I had just experienced. I was overwhelmed with emotion. Tears streamed down my face as I realized I had been given another chance, another opportunity to change my life and follow the path Jesus had shown me. I looked around the room, feeling as if I was seeing everything for the first time. The mundane details of life that I once took for granted now felt precious. I had been to the other side, and now I was back with a newfound sense of purpose. The days following my return were challenging. My body felt weak, and my mind struggled to process everything I had seen and heard. It felt surreal. One moment I was in the presence of Jesus, and the next I was back in my small apartment, surrounded by the noise of the world. But deep inside, I carried the message he had given me, and I knew I had to share it. Returning to normal life was anything but easy. After experiencing heaven and the overwhelming love of Jesus, the world felt different, almost dull in comparison. Everything I once valued seemed trivial. My old habits, my daily routines, and even my career didn't hold the same meaning they once did. I had been changed, and there was no going back to who I used to be. I struggled to explain my experience to those around me. Some were skeptical, others were curious, but most couldn't fully grasp the depth of what I had been through. I tried to share the lessons Jesus had taught me about lust, self-control, and forgiveness, but I quickly realized that change wouldn't happen overnight, not for me and not for others. I began making small changes in my life. I replaced old habits with prayer and meditation. Instead of seeking comfort in temporary pleasures, I found solace in God's word. I started attending church regularly, and more importantly, I focused on building a personal relationship with Jesus. The biggest challenge was resisting the temptations I had once given into so easily. There were moments of struggle, times when I felt weak, but I reminded myself of what Jesus had shown me. His words echoed in my mind, "Seek me first." That simple phrase became my guiding light. Over time, I began to see changes, not only in myself, but in those around me. My friends and family noticed a difference in my attitude and my priorities. I felt lighter, more at peace, and truly connected to my purpose for the first time in my life. To everyone watching or reading my story, I want you to know this. Jesus' love is real, and his grace is greater than any mistake you've made. I was once trapped in cycles of guilt and shame, believing that I was too far gone, but Jesus showed me that nothing could separate us from his love. If you're struggling with personal battles, whether it's lust, self-doubt, or feeling unworthy, I want you to know that there is hope. You don't have to face it alone. Jesus is always there, waiting with open arms, ready to heal and restore you. All it takes is a step toward him. One of the biggest lessons I learned from my experience is that seeking fulfillment in temporary pleasures only leaves us empty. True satisfaction, real peace, comes from aligning our hearts with God's will. The world tells us to chase happiness in all the wrong places, but Jesus offers us something far greater: eternal joy, purpose, and unconditional love. I hope my story serves as a reminder that you are not alone in your struggles. Whatever you are facing, bring it to Jesus. He doesn't expect perfection. He simply asks for your heart. And when you surrender it to him, you'll find a freedom and peace that the world could never provide. I encourage you to seek him, to trust his plan for your life, and to walk the path he's laid out for you. He loves you, and he wants you to experience the fullness of life that comes from following him. Thank you for taking the time to hear my story. May you find the courage to seek Jesus in your own life and experience the incredible love and forgiveness that only he can offer. God bless you.